Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of the AnandTech podcast. This is podcast 40, our CES coverage. Now, unfortunately, we did take and record a podcast at the show itself. The audio is pretty much unrecoverable. So this is a post-show recording where I'm going to be bringing on the editors one at a time, as they've been available since the show's ended. And we're going to speak about some of the stuff that we all saw. Mostly more the sort of the interesting stuff than perhaps maybe the headline topics. But I know a few of the guys really wanted to talk about things that made them go, that's rather interesting. Ryan's going to join me in a bit, but I wanted to start off the podcast first. And I'm going to talk about the launch of the new Kaby Lake generation of processors. This is Intel's 7th generation of the core microarchitecture, and it's the first time that they've done the optimization step in their new process architecture optimization methodology. Now, what this means is that, well, optimization itself is pretty vague as a term, but in Intel's way, this time around, it means we have exactly the same microarchitecture as a 6th generation Skylake, so there's no IPC increase, there's no increase for the number of instructions per clock that the processors will do, so a 3 GHz Skylake performs pretty much identically to a 3 GHz Kaby Lake. But what they have done here is that they've essentially relaxed the strain on the silicon itself. Typically they make things very dense to decrease die area, but that has trade-offs such as power generation, but does make it cheaper to actually produce the dies. Now, Intel is saying that the new generation processors still have the same density, but they're relaxed, so it copes with heat generation better, and this in turn has given them a better voltage frequency profile on the silicon. That in turn means that for what happened with Skylake, you can now buy an equivalent Kaby Lake processor that's about 300 MHz faster for the same price. As a result of that, the launch during CES involved all their desktop line SKUs and a significant portion of their mobile SKUs. We did reviews of the two main desktop parts, the i7 overclockable part, the i7 7700K, and the i5 7600K. Those reviews are on the website. Fully encourage you to go look at those. We also did an overview of the platform as a whole, taking into account the improvements for 40 nanometer plus process. There's also a little bit in there about Speed Shift version 2. This is the way that Intel brings up from a idle frequency to the peak frequency much faster than before, and it's the 2nd generation of this new technology. Again, fully encourage you to read that. But we did the i7 and the i5 reviews. The i7 quad core with hyper-threading, base 4.2 GHz, turbos up to 4.5 GHz. Out of the box, it performs better than a slightly overclocked Devil's Canyon. So we have a new performance champion in the i7. Then that'll be retailing for about $350. The list price is about $310. So once you add on a little bit of profit margin for the retailers, we're looking at about $350. The i5 7600K. Now this is the quad core without hyper-threading. This one actually surprised me more. Because the i7, when we did it through our CPU AVX testing, now this is a 91 watt TDP part. Now TDP, thermal design power, stands for how much the cooling has to cope with the heat generation of the processor, not necessarily power consumption, but it is a pretty good metric nonetheless. Now for a 91 watt part, that consumed 90 watts. So as expected, that was just purely based on the CPU. You can argue that the TDP encompasses the GPU as well, but for a performance part like this, the GPU is not typically used by prosumers. But again, going back to the i5, this is the i5 7600K is also a 91 watt TDP part, but in our power testing, it only achieved 63 watts, and this surprised me a lot, especially for an AVX load. AVX instructions are typically very very dense, they generate a lot of heat, and can cause a processor to fall to its knees if it's not properly configured. So the i5, the 3.8 GHz base, 4.2 GHz turbo, hits 63 watts for a 91 watt TDP. That's pretty energy efficient if you ask me, and as a result it actually got recommended over the i7 for people who are interested in the new Kaby Lake processors, because with the price difference is about $100, and then given the fact that it produces less heat at stock, you could probably save another $25 to $50 on a cooler, and that $150 for, especially for somebody who's very price conscious with their system, can go to a GPU upgrade, a memory upgrade, or a storage upgrade. In the review, we listed that processor as the one that the smart money goes on. Now, along with Kaby Lake, we also have 200 series motherboards, and over 80 motherboards have been released through all the manufacturers, and we're going to do a preview of essentially all of those, a visual inspection on where the chipsets and what controllers are on. Now, if you're that interested in motherboards, as perhaps I am, and I'm perhaps the only one that's that interested in motherboards, the new features for the chipset aren't particularly exciting. We have Optane memory support. Now, Optane memory being Intel's version of 3D XPoint on caching and not storage or DRAM. They've kind of screwed up the naming system there, but Optane Memory Ready is the logo that's going on to the motherboards. And there's also, for the Z270 chipset, there's 4 more high-speed I/O lanes, which means 4 more PCIe lanes for extra functionality of the chipset. That doesn't mean much unless you have added controllers. And for me, the more exciting thing about the chipset is actually the evolution of the controllers. Now, along with the launch, there's essentially 3 or 4 interesting controllers to go along with the new motherboards. First one up, I guess, is there's a new Realtek audio codec, a new high-end one called the ALC 1220. This essentially is another step up over the ALC 1150, which we saw on pretty much every motherboard over $120 for the 100 series. And the main improvement here is that it brings the line-in recording SNR, signal-to-noise ratio, support up to 113 dB. It used to be about 95. So we had 120 dB SNR out and 95 in. With the 1220, it moves to 120 and 113. Now, along with the ALC 1220, the ASUS have a specialized version called the ALC 1220A. This is a customized version that they've worked with Realtek for, and there aren't that many changes to it. It essentially takes some of the hardware off the silicon and creates a smaller silicon die for less power and making it a little bit cheaper, because these audio codecs aren't just used in consumer grade motherboards and PCs. So they decided, well, we can take some stuff out of that, and they have an exclusive on those ALC 1220A chips. When we get to the reviews, we'll obviously have a look at both and see how they perform. Along with the audio codec, we have new Ethernet controllers to play with. Rivet Networks Killer released their E2500 chip to supersede the E2400. That technically came out in September, and we saw a couple of 100 series motherboards, particularly from MSI, with it on. We're going to see pretty much every Killer-enabled motherboard for the 200 series using the E2500. And the main thing here is that it's more forward-looking in terms of support. So Linksys announced a router with Killer network support to deal with priority traffic over a network. The 2500 helps enable that. There's also a new software package to go along with it. And we've actually been talking back and forth with the Rivet Network guys on that software platform to make sure it's user readable and more instinctive to the previous software, which was dire, but that was actually as a result of the partnerships they had at the time while being under the Qualcomm brand. So E2500 will be seeing that proliferate a lot through the 200 series motherboards. But on the networking side, we'll also see a Quantia play a role. Now, back in December, Quantia announced the AQC 107 and 108. These are multi-gigabit Ethernet controllers supporting 2.5 and 5 gigabit Ethernet over standard RJ45 connectors. The AQC 107 supports 10 gigabit as well, and we actually saw a Gigabyte launch a PCI, or at least showcase a PCIe card at CES with that controller on board. But the goal here is they can do 2.5 and 5 gigabit Ethernet for cheaper than the 10 gigabit controllers, such as the Intel X550-82, which is about an extra $150 on the cost of a motherboard, or $250 if you want a dual port card. Quantia said that the prices for their chips for 2.5 and 5 gig will be a lot cheaper than that, and they expect the ecosystem with consumer grade switches to come out through over 2017 and into 2018. Currently, we've only had 2 motherboards announced from ASRock with the chip on board, and like I say, Gigabyte is launching a PCIe card, hopefully, and we expect a few more motherboards to start playing in this space. These network controllers also do 1 gigabit, so they go perfectly fine into a standard network, but the design here is to be future-proof for not that much more than a standard Intel gigabit NIC, and not much more power draw, so that's going to be interesting. Also on the controller side, we have the ASMedia 2142 controller. This is a new USB 3.1 Gen 2, so 10 gigabit per second controller. Now, we have had the ASM 1142 on motherboards up to this point, and that uses one PCIe lane to give 2 USB 3.1 ports. That effectively limits the combined speed of the 2 ports if used in conjunction. What the ASM 2142, the new upgraded chip, does is it has 2 PCIe lanes input. So now you can get full speed from both ports at the same time. And the fact that the chipsets now have so many PCIe lanes off of it, there's pretty much no penalty for using the 2142 chip. Now, the 2142 chip also supports moving the USB 3.1 off the motherboard into a front panel. So I know that a couple of the motherboard manufacturers are now playing around with front panel connectors, such that case manufacturers, when they start putting USB 3.1 Gen 2 ports on their cases, they can just put the connector in and get a USB 3.1 Gen 2 port. So we're going to see that playing out as well in the motherboard space. But Kaby Lake as a whole, I think the important thing here is, now I know a lot of websites trashed the processors and reviews saying, oh, there's no innovation anymore. The CPU market, from my perspective, is a case of, well, it's for the people who are looking to upgrade, not necessarily the people who want to stay at the forefront of the technology every generation. If you're upgrading every year, then you are a special case. I'm sorry to say, but that is the truth. It's the people who, still have Sandy Bridge, who still have Nehalem, who still have Core 2, who are saying, okay, I actually need to upgrade. I want PCIe Gen 3. I want the latest USB protocols. I want Thunderbolt. I want M.2 drive. I want PCIe storage. I want U.2 connectivity. They're the people who are upgrading, not necessarily the people who still have Devil's Canyon, who still have Haswell, who still have Skylake, or if you happen to get Broadwell, lucky you. So I think we have to accept that this is a state of play with the paradigm shifting. There is no paradigm shift anymore in modern CPU x86 architecture. What Intel have is very tuned, and we see that, given AMD's Ryzen architectural details, it's not a complete copy paste. There is unique IP in there, but that's pretty much the way we're going. And anybody expecting more than a few percent IPC increase year on year are going to be very disappointed in the next 3 to 5 years, depending on how new process nodes turn out. But Kaby Lake, it's there if you need to upgrade, and it works perfectly fine. Now we do one of the new things with the Kaby Lake was the overclockable i3 processor. We haven't done our full review yet as I'm speaking about this, but we have taken all the data, and all of our data is in our benchmark database. And actually what's surprising there for me is, as I'll explain in the review, is that there are quite a few benchmarks where the i3 7350K is basically on parity with the i7 2600K. Now, that's the i7 Sandy Bridge CPU that a lot of people are still on. For single-threaded performance, the i3 blows it out of the water, being 4.2 GHz and, four generations worth of architecture ahead. And on the multi-threaded stuff, the i3 is a dual-core with hyper-threading, the i7 is a quad-core with hyper-threading, so the i7 has double the threads to play with. But actually, the i3 can sort of be within 20% performance, which is interesting. And if we look at something that's very scalable, like POV-Ray, which is a ray tracing program, if the i3 was at 5.5 GHz, it'd be overtaking the i7 2600K. So at some point in the near future, I think there's going to be a parity between the i7 2600K and the i3 overclockable part. And the benefits there is, well, if you buy the new one, you get the new platform, you get access to all the new features, but you have a much lower power part. So I think there's going to be a very significant changeover at that point. And that's going to be interesting to me. Now, stay tuned for more of our Kaby Lake coverage. For day one, I did have 7 front page articles planned, and I think I managed to write 3. Writing about 30,000 words on the last couple of days before launch, so stay tuned. We're going to have a full overview of the 200 series chipsets. We're going to have a full overview on the motherboards. We're going to have an i3 review. We're going to have a detailed look into why the IPC hasn't changed, and we're hopefully going to do some performance and overclock scaling and memory scaling at some point as well. We do have a new benchmark, Windows 10 based benchmark suite in the works, and hoping to bring that out in February, in time for future launches. I think future launches sometime in Q1 or whenever AMD decide to launch Ryzen. Elsewhere at the show, big thing for me was the ASUS's take on the XPS 13. So XPS 13 is a laptop by Dell that uses what they call an infinity edge display. They have a display that essentially has very minimal bezel on 3 sides, which means that they've moved the camera down to the bottom of the display. But it means you can fit a 14-inch display in a 13-inch class chassis. Now, ASUS have done this with the ASUS Pro B9440. Now, that's not an exciting name, I'm sure you agree. This is a business class laptop designed for business customers, but they use a similar sort of methodology to get a nice screen into a very thin bezel display, into a chassis that is using a magnesium alloy, so it's really light, promising 10 hours battery life, using i7 and i5 processors. These are the I believe they're using the 18-watt Iris Plus graphics, the new Kaby Lake ones. And yeah, starting from $999 for an 8 gig DRAM and I think a 128 gig storage or a 256 gig storage. It's coming in March, but they showcased it at CES. For connectivity, it has 2 Type-C ports, one of which is for the power, and also a headphone jack. It's very thin, it's very light. You think it's a display model when you lift it, seriously. And coming personally from the ZenBook Infinity, which is currently slicing my wrists due to a very sharp edge, I think that's going to be a potential interesting upgrade. The one thing I don't necessarily like about it is that it doesn't have a touchscreen model on the ASUS Pro B9440. I've got to a point in my work life where a touchscreen is pretty much vital. The number of times I select a window by poking my laptop, or just scrolling with my thumb, or ordering the shopping with my other half on the sofa with it, means that I can't. I don't really want to lose that functionality in a laptop. So unfortunately, the ASUS Pro doesn't have that, which may end up me looking somewhere else if I want to upgrade soon. But for me, that was a really interesting part to see at the show. Now, at this stage, I'm going to bring in our editor-in-chief, Ryan Smith. Say hi, Ryan.
Hi, everybody. This is Ryan Smith.
Now, you had a fun experience with NVIDIA's self-driving car, right?
Yes, I did. So to make a long story shorter, NVIDIA has been in the self-driving car industry for some time now, and to show off sort of the progress of their technology, they've set up a demo here at CES with a couple of different cars. So over in the North lot, they set up a track area with both their BB-8 car and a Q7 from their partner Audi. So I was over there on Thursday to check out the self-driving cars and even take a ride in one.
So these are, what were they, small electric cars or family saloons or coupes or...
So BB-8, which unfortunately I didn't get a chance to see in person, is NVIDIA's, I guess best to say, personal car, and that's a sedan. But the car I did have a chance to see was the Audi Q7, which is somewhere between a minivan and an SUV. Maybe a crossover is the best way to put it. But anyhow, so I was over there, and as part of their efforts, NVIDIA and Audi were showing it off. So what they were doing was that they were actually letting the press ride around in the Q7. And just to be clear here, this is a self-driving car, so the fact that they're letting the press be anywhere near it while it's doing anything, let alone in it, shows a high degree of confidence in how well it works. I did not have to sign my life away to get in this car.
So the whole idea was that they were giving you a briefing on NVIDIA's technology, so you were in the back seat and they were in the front seat, or?
Correct. So what it was is the Q7 is running NVIDIA's current Drive PX2 system, which is their current development system for self-driving cars, a couple of Tegra processors, some Maxwell GPUs for extra processing, a whole bunch of I/O for cameras and whatnot, and then wire that up to a car as you see fit. The specific Q7 that was on demo here was essentially set up to show how far the technology has progressed. What Audi and NVIDIA did was that they set up a track, sort of an oval with different areas to represent different types of hazards. You know, painted line section, a quasi off-road section, a section with traffic cones and construction signs, basically trying to give the AI a high-level overview of driving. So what NVIDIA and Audi did was they trained their vehicles on this course the week before CES over a period of 4 days. So these vehicles, they went from knowing nothing about driving to understanding how to drive the course in 4 days. And to be clear here, when I say drive the course, I don't mean they know the layout of the course. I mean they can understand everything they will see on the course and react to it.
It's like when a person drives a road continually and then, say, a new hazard occurs, the system can recognize, hey, this is a new hazard in a stretch of road I've driven before. Let's update my internal memory as to what this is and remember how to deal with it, referring to previous situations which have had similar instances occur.
So that's really the beauty of it. It's not, I've driven this previous stretch of road before. I've been out driving so much, I know what obstacles are, I know what rocks are, I know what pain lines are, I know what traffic cones are, I know what signs are. I mean, yes, they used the same course to train it as they did to show the press, just because that's where it was. But it's not about knowing the course. It's about knowing how to react to these obstacles and how to stay in the lines, how to figure out where to go, that kind of thing. So the Audi Q7 itself, and this was perhaps the most amazing part, had just one camera. A normal self-driving car setup will be composed several cameras, or maybe a radar unit or a LiDAR unit. But no, this was just one single camera. Technically, it had less visual acuity than you or I, since it only had monocular vision instead of stereo vision, and it was trained this way over a period of 4 days to learn how to drive. And it worked well. So what they did is they put the press in the back, while in this case, Audi's engineers were in the front. Somebody in the driver's seat solely to take control in case something went wrong and to engage and disengage a demo, and then another engineer in the passenger seat to explain what was going on with the technology, what they were looking to prove, etc. Basically give you the spiel. And so a fellow from CNN and myself were in the back of the Audi and got a chance to pop in and see the demo. So what happens here is once they engage it, the car takes off, drives at about 7 miles an hour, and it goes through this track over several laps where they change it up a few different times to show how it reacts. So I will admit, it's a bit of an interesting experience when you're sitting in a car that's driving by itself. So there is somebody in the driver's seat, but he's not touching the pedal, he's not touching the wheels, hands are just in his lap, and this car is just accelerating and decelerating and turning all on its own as it sees fit. And so
to clarify on the sensor front, we've got one single front-facing camera, so no rear camera, no sort of the only collision detection mechanism was at the front, and you also told me it has no GPS, so it's not as if it's just running off of geolocation coordinates and driving around that way either. It is just it is just essentially a brain working off visual information.
That is exactly, and that is exactly what they want to show off with this demo, just working as close to human-like capabilities as possible to show what could already be done with current technologies and human limitations, how it can drive so much like a human so quickly.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. If we fast forward, say, 5-10 years and we have these cars on the roads, they're not going to be trained on 4 days of data, right? It's going to be...
Oh, goodness, no. They'll be trained on years of data, and they'll constantly have their neural networks updated here. But the point is just to show how quickly you can learn on 4 days of data, and how much you can do off a single camera. I mean, the reality is that the cars that are already being test-driven out in California, out in Germany, elsewhere, are equipped with better sensors, more sensors, etc. They face more complex conditions. But for CES demo, where A, of course, you want things to go well for the press, but B, you have a limited amount of space to work in, you want to make it challenging in a different sort of way, rather than a large, expansive environment, a smaller environment, but you give it fewer sensors to work with.
Now, in terms of, for anybody who's not followed autonomous vehicles before, they're classified in stages, where stage 0 or stage 1 is the user has full control, and stage 5 is the fact that there's not even a steering wheel, and it's fully autonomous by the sensors and the internal computers. What sort of level would you say this is?
I'm not really sure it fits into the level designation. I guess if you had to assign a level to it, it would be somewhere between level 3 and level 4, just based off its capabilities. But it's not meant to be a complete system, so that's why it doesn't fit in too well.
Well, so level 3, level 4 is you're essentially in the passenger, you're essentially in the driver's seat. But the computer has complete control, and when it says it isn't confident enough to drive, it will then hand the controls over to you. That's kind of level 4. So you can't necessarily sleep, but you have to be able to react when the system tells you to. Whereas level 3 is you have to take control sometimes.
Yes, in this case, like I said, it's a small scale demo, so it doesn't fit into that categorization too well. But yeah, somewhere between 3 and 4.
And Jensen Huang in NVIDIA's keynote, which was one of the main keynotes at CES, I understand he's been after one of the main keynotes for a long, long time. So to celebrate 50 years of CES, he announced the partnership with Audi and said they will have a level 4 production ready to go car, not necessarily on sale, but production ready by 2020. Do you think that's feasible? Based on your small...
That is a difficult question. So let me tell you, out of all the demos I saw, and I saw some other cool stuff we'll get to in a bit, the self-driving car is the single coolest thing I saw at CES. Yes, I know others are also showing off self-driving cars, so this isn't just an NVIDIA thing, but still, sitting in a car that can drive itself, and let's be clear here, it did a pretty good job. It wasn't perfect. It was a little hard on some of its turns, but still, for a car that's only had 4 days to learn how to drive, I felt it did a really good job. That was really impressive. As to whether NVIDIA and Audi can get there in 2020, maybe? I really don't know. It's going to depend on the conditions. It's going to depend on legal framework. I think in terms of technology, maybe not 2020, but give it 10 years or whatever. Yes, we'll develop the technology to have a car that can drive itself in 99.9% of all situations. The problem is going to be legal framework to figure out liability, what happens if in that 0.1% if it gets into an accident, etc., etc. But yes, I believe if not 2020, at least shortly thereafter, that they could have a level 4 car ready.
You took a video of your experience. Is that going to be posted online?
Yes, I did. By the time you're hearing this, you'll probably have already seen the video, but if not, then shortly thereafter I'll have a article up and a video, both from inside and outside of the car, showing it going around the track and doing its thing. It's quite amazing.
You're looking forward to it. So aside from self-driving, what else impressed you at CES?
Other things that impressed me at CES. So while we're on our NVIDIA kick here, I also, before heading out to see the self-driving car, I had a chance to stop by NVIDIA's gaming booth, where they had a few things going on, showing their gaming-related announcements that they had made at the end of Jensen's keynote. So because Jensen's keynote was wide audience focused, it actually didn't contain everything. One of the things that didn't make the keynote was an HDR monitor design from NVIDIA. So this is a little complex, so I'll break it down. NVIDIA, getting ready for HDR displays, has decided to develop their own specifications for an HDR G-Sync 4K monitor. This monitor, it's essentially NVIDIA selected panel backlighting system, display controller, etc., which they are then handing out to OEMs to sell as a final product. So what we end up seeing here at the NVIDIA suite is the ASUS version of this monitor. And so what you have is, I apologize, the model number escapes me at the moment, but a 27-inch ASUS monitor, full HDR capable, full array backlit, able to go up to 1,000 nits, 4K display with a 144 hertz refresh rate. And it's essentially NVIDIA's idea of what an HDR monitor should be. This is classic, high-end, cost is no object, NVIDIA hardware. So and let me just tell you, it's just absolutely beautiful. You've got a 4K display able to refresh at high refresh rate, but the HDR, it's just the full array backlighting combined with the wider color gamut, it gets just shy of complete DCI, especially on the demos NVIDIA selected. It next to a ASUS last generation ASUS 4K G-Sync monitor, which is also an IPS-based display and is by no means a bad display. In fact, until right now, it was one of the best displays on the market. But next to it, it's just at times a night and day difference.
I actually saw this at the ASUS booth, the current high-end versus this. And, having high dynamic range and, the wider color gamut means that it's surprising how much more detail you see in sort of far off in what is pseudo infinite focal length on images, but the reds just popped, the yellows just popped. Explain HDR for people who don't necessarily understand HDR.
All right, so HDR, high dynamic range, it essentially refers to the ability for a monitor to show both dark areas and light areas at the same time. So you might have a sun in the distance that has a brightness of several hundred nits, and then a shadow in front of you that may only be 10 or 20 nits. Current monitors generally don't have a backlighting system capable of displaying this. They're really designed for Windows desktop duty first and foremost. So a monitor may be able to go up to 300 nits or so, but it has no way to modulate the backlight in a way to say have an area that's 300 nits and another area that's 10 or 20 nits. So instead what we get is what we call standard dynamic range, which works. You can have bright areas, you can have dark areas, but you can't have this incredible contrast ratio between them because of how backlighting works. And so when we talk about HDR monitors, well, there's two things going on. One is an advanced backlighting system capable of setting up that difference, but also HDR is being accompanied by a wider color gamut. Current monitors, we use sRGB. Really, it's a color gamut that was specified a long time ago. It works. It's not by any means bad, but
it governs most desktop experiences, essentially all desktop experiences to a certain degree.
It does, and it's not the complete color spectrum is the best way to put it. The actual color spectrum that humans can see is wider than sRGB. There are several standards to replace it. There's DCI, there's Rec 2020, etc. And over time we are going to see color gamuts increase. But the important part is when you combine a wider color gamut with an HDR backlighting solution, you get the ability to set up these scenes that are just more vivid, brighter, greater contrast, more vivid than anything you can do on a current generation standard dynamic range monitor. And as press, this is both amazing and frustrating. I say amazing because when you see this in action, it's just jaw-dropping. It's frustrating because what can I show you for an HDR monitor that you can actually see? You cannot see this on a standard dynamic range monitor. It requires something that is beyond the range of your laptop, of your phone, of your desktop display. So all we can really do is show really badly engineered comparisons that look artificial, but otherwise try to describe it in words. You have to see it to completely understand what it is it does.
So the monitor we saw was the ASUS ROG Swift PG27UQ. So 27-inch 4K, 144 Hz, which we understand was on a single display port cable, which
Yes.
means that we have display stream compression, which is meant to be lossless, so there's sort of no loss in detail there.
Is display stream compression confirmed?
Apparently the demos that NVIDIA were using were on a single cable, so they would have to use display stream compression in order to get all the data through.
Because this is an NVIDIA customized monitor, I would not immediately rule in display stream compression unless we get confirmation. Essentially, NVIDIA could very well overclock the DisplayPort interface because they control both sides.
Okay. I mean, I spoke to the ASUS guys, and they said it was on DisplayPort, so unless they are doing something special, it will be with display stream compression.
Yeah, I
Unconfirmed.
That's a question I really don't have an answer to. I would be surprised if display stream compression was used.
Okay, so we said 1000 nits brightness, so the contrast ratio's got to be closer to 10,000, I guess.
Yes, unfortunately I don't have the specs in front of me right now, but yes, because of the full array backlighting, 384 different zones, you can essentially have one part of the screen where the backlight is off and another part where it's going full blast. It's not infinite contrast, in part because you don't have as many zones as you have pixels, but yes, it is a very high degree of contrast, far better than anything you'll get on a standard monitor right now.
So with regards pricing and a date, what we have from the ASUS version of this monitor, probably looking at perhaps around end of Q2, Q3, which incidentally is around the same time Computex, and you're looking at around 1,500 to $2,000 US. So this is premium top of the stack monitor porn essentially.
It is, but man, once you see that monitor, it is going to be the monitor to have in the PC gaming space this year. It's just that good, and like I said at the start of this segment, this is NVIDIA going for broke in terms of design. It's going to cost a fortune. I'm sure they're making a tidy profit off of it, but dang, does it look good.
And how many monitors can I put in a hardware requisition request for?
You can put in requests for exactly 0.
Oh. That's a shame. It kind of makes me sad that we don't have a proper monitor reviewer on staff, dedicated to just monitors like we used to, because I really want to see how this thing performs.
Oh, I suspect we'll be reviewing it, and I think Brandon Chester will be having a very fun time with that one.
I expect he will. So, cars, monitors, theft, subterfuge. What happened with Razer's Project Valerie?
Ah, yes, Project Valerie. So here's an interesting item. It's almost better to talk about the laptop first before getting into the theft of said laptop. But since the theft is unfortunately what's in the news, it's probably what we should start off with first. So Razer brought over a prototype laptop to CES to show off, to gauge audience and press reaction to, both to sort of promote their brand and to figure out if the concept design is something that they could actually bring to market. And that laptop was called Project Valerie. Essentially, this is a Razer Blade Pro taken to the next level. Instead of just a single screen, they have developed an interesting system to allow it to have 3 displays. So when fully deployed, displays will come out from the left and right side behind the monitor, giving you a portable desktop replacement style laptop with 3 4K displays.
This was just a technical showcase. This is saying, our engineers can do this. What do you think? Not necessarily we're going to put this into production, because obviously battery life on such a thing would be terrible.
Yes, make no mistake. It is a desktop replacement class laptop. Even if they give it the internal guts of the Razer Blade Pro in terms of GPU and CPU and whatnot, it still has the weight of 3 4K IGZO displays on it. So even if you only use the one display, battery life is never going to be great. But if you need a portable workstation, this is probably the closest anybody has gotten to truly replicating a desktop PC. So it's a very interesting concept. Unfortunately, the hinge system that makes this all possible was not fully on display at CES. So what it is, Razer brought a few different versions of the laptop. They had sort of probably best to say a working prototype to show triple monitor gaming and whatnot in action, just to give you an idea of what the experience would be fully deployed. They had a second model that was also working, but wasn't really meant for heavy use, which had the final industrial design. Rather than being cobbled together, it looked like a final shipping product, but it didn't have the fully working hinge system. Razer didn't bring that out to CES, though they did post some videos of it in action. It's a really neat idea. It's going to be a high-end laptop, 3 4K IGZO displays cost a lot, and then you have to factor in the CPU, the GPU, GTX 1080 or equivalent, that kind of a thing.
You've got a $2,500 laptop with just one display, so if you add in another $500, $600, $700 per extra display, you're easily looking at, $4,500 if it ever came to market.
Oh, well more than $4,500. We're talking a laptop that's probably going to be $9,000, $10,000 if I had to take a stab in the dark here.
So it's going to compete against the Acer Predator 21-inch curved screen laptop for price.
If it were to come to market, there's a very good chance it would. That's the kind of mark that they would be going for with this laptop. But I had a chance to look at it, sit down, see it in action. It's a very neat concept. I'm not going to say for sure whether it's going to take off in the market or not. I'm not going to make any predictions here. But I know there are a class of people out there who would like to have a triple monitor laptop to take with them. They may be more on the accounting side than the gaming side. But there is definitely a group of people out there that would be interested in such a product. Financial
analysts.
Yeah, exactly. The question is whether Razer can do it in a way that's affordable. This is going to be an expensive, low-volume product, so it may not be a viable market product. And that's one of the things that they were out at CES for, to figure out if they could get this to market, who would be interested in it, what kind of a price would be appropriate, etc. Basically, fill out the market. Razer does a lot of conceptual designs that don't make it to market, which is both a good thing and a frustrating thing. It's a good thing because they're actually doing things that are relatively innovative. It's a bad thing because you see all these Razer concepts that never make it to market. I think this is one of their better shots in terms of products that might make it to market.
So, conceptually, it's a $10,000 device, but Razer offering $25,000 for information related to its theft.
Yes. So I'm not entirely sure the details here, which models were stolen, but two of the prototypes were stolen from Razer's booth on the show floor of the Las Vegas Convention Center sometime on Sunday after CES had closed. Unfortunately, Razer isn't able to supply much in terms of details and how it was stolen, whether this was caught on camera or anything, but somehow somebody made off with two prototypes. I'm guessing it was the working play prototype and the industrial design prototype that I saw in Razer's suite early in the week, but it's possible Razer may have had more prototypes there than I had seen. Either way, yes, somebody made off with two prototype laptops, and stuff gets stolen from CES now and then, but I'm having a hard time recalling last time somebody made off with something that was worth, over $10,000 like this.
Especially at that size. Now, so the show essentially finishes Sunday evening, and it's a trade show. You can only get in with a trade pass, and there's full-on blown security. But the fact of the matter is, when you have a hall full of over 100 companies, you have so many people going in and out, even after the show's finished, packing up, moving stuff into vans, tearing down displays that, a box could be misplaced, it could be mislabeled, it could end up on the wrong dolly. But the fact is, this is the technical showcase part for Razer for the show, so you'd expect it to be under lock and key.
Yes, and this is where, unfortunately, we don't have enough details to really say what's going on. We've never been around for the end of CES, so there's a little bit of assumption on our part, but if it's anything like the setup part of CES, which we have been around for, then it's a madhouse, people going around trying to get things in and out on time. They've got deadlines, and especially at the end here, everyone's tired at this point. The Razer guys have been working 14, 16-hour days for nearly a week, so I don't know if somebody made off with the box was placed in, somebody got their hands on these prototypes before they were boxed up or what. Although I do suspect that it was taken out in some kind of a box because, besides being unique, the Valerie machines are quite large, especially with their displays fully extended.
To be honest, when they're setting up the show, it is fairly easy to go in a side door and walk around. It's less easy when it's, say, at a suite in a hotel, because somebody obviously notices that you're different. So
yes.
It's now the question is, do we want to postulate on the potential, if it's stolen, then is it stolen by an industry competitor, or is it stolen by somebody who just wants to say, haha, look what I have? Is it going to show up in an alley a few days being completely torn down or torn apart? Is somebody going to try and flog it on the black market? This is a typical sort of postulation we don't ever go into at AnandTech, so I don't really want to say what's going to happen to it because we don't know, and anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's like stealing the Mona Lisa. Okay, yes, you have a highly valuable painting. How are you going to get rid of it? So, did somebody steal it for industrial espionage? Maybe. Did they steal it for themselves? Just steal it? Maybe. I do think it would require some bit of skill to pull this off, simply because there are some security in place. There's cameras, so you'd have to know something about how CES works in order to take out something as large as a laptop.
To be honest, if you really wanted a laptop with 3 monitors, you could just take USB type monitors with you if you really, really needed it. So there's got to be some value beyond just having a 3-screen laptop for somebody to take it.
Yes, quite possibly. And the interesting thing is, as I mentioned before, even the industrial design prototype wasn't a working hinge model, so I don't know if somebody was hoping to make off with Razer's hinges or what, if it was, assuming it was industrial espionage, but what they got wasn't quite complete. It wasn't a fully fleshed out laptop, so it is a prototype after all, so what they got was something less than complete. Either way, it's just something that sucks for everyone. It discourages companies like Razer from coming out and showing off these products to the public. It discourages them from developing something like this. Does something like this mean Project Valerie all of a sudden doesn't get made?
Well, it's there have been other theories as well. Perhaps it hasn't been stolen; it's just been misplaced, or perhaps it's extra press coverage. But then you'd argue that something actually like Valerie got so much press coverage anyway.
Yeah, Valerie wasn't lacking for press coverage. I mean, it's a genuinely neat idea. Go out to Razer's booth, and a lot of people were there to see it. A lot of press were lining up to get into Razer Suite to see it. Razer's briefing the press on it ahead of CES. Even though it's just a concept, it's one of those things where you've never seen something quite like it before, and it's neat to see it in person.
It's funny, the story Ganesh told us. He said he went up to the Razer booth and he went up to touch it, and somebody said, no touching, prototype. And then they saw Ganesh's badge said AnandTech, and then they said, oh, it's okay, you're AnandTech.
Yes, we do tend to touch things. We do tend to break things. There's probably a reason Intel didn't let us touch the laptops at their keynote.
Yeah, I guess. I do want to end on one point about tech showcases, which is something that I've been saying for a few years now. If you take something like the car industry at the car shows, somebody like Volkswagen or and Audi and other car companies, what they'll do is they'll put on stand a car that will never come to market, but they'll say, we gave our engineers 6 weeks and this is what they come up with, and it's something crazy like a Golf with a Lamborghini suspension and a V12 engine, or something absolutely impractical to come to market, but it's an exercise in saying we have the best engineers. Now, we don't really get that in the PC and mobile space, except for things like Razer with Project Valerie and what happened last year with Project Christine. Is that last year or the year before? We saw it a few years ago also with ASUS doing some of their sort of dual chipset motherboards, dual socket motherboard designs. And I feel we don't get it in the tech industry because the tech industry, the consumer, it's a press problem as well. Because the two questions everybody asks is, when is it going to be released and how much? And I know people don't necessarily understand what a tech showcase is if they continually ask those two questions. I know, what's your thoughts on having tech showcases at shows?
Well, we do have tech showcases. I do think you're wrong a little bit in that respect. This year we had Valerie, we have the self-driving cars. Last year we had Dell's what's now most likely been canceled OLED monitor. So there is stuff like that, but companies like Razer, companies like ASUS, they're in the business of making money. If they do the R&D on a project before CES even rolls around, they probably have a pretty good idea of how well they can manufacture it, how well it'll sell, etc., and they aren't going to waste time showing something that they can't sell. Razer, in these few cases where we do see products like that, are unique in that they're unique enough products that you can't really predict what it's going to do, so you do bring it out, you do show it off in order to try to figure out if there's going to be a market for it. But I think that's mostly just a function of the market. Even as relatively young as the consumer electronics industry is, having a pretty good idea of what consumers want, how to present it, how to hold trade secrets, etc. There's not as much of a need for prestige projects like there is in the automobile industry.
I guess you have a point. I still like it when engineers turn around and say, we're awesome, look at what we can build.
Oh yeah, and it is, and this isn't just a construction thing. It's a shame that engineers in general in this industry don't get quite as much attention as they deserve. You sit down with some of them, as press here, we're idiots. I'm sorry, Ian, but even you, I'm afraid are idiots, isn't it? Even you, I'm afraid, are an idiot compared to some of the people we work with, the people with multiple PhDs who can route a signal in their sleep, that kind of a thing. Or somebody who can develop a hinge to allow a laptop to have 3 monitors. That's some really impressive work, and these people don't necessarily get the attention they deserve, unfortunately. But that's less a prestige project. That's more just just so many people work on a product these days that it's hard to single out and recognize one person, especially with a public who can only dedicate so much time, so much thought to the subject.
Yeah. You have a figurehead and the people who actually do the really, really complex work. You hope they get reimbursed for their efforts in terms of a good salary, but then that depends if the product sells, I guess.
Exactly.
So, regarding CES, I mean, I know it was a crazy busy year, but did you have anything to add before I bring on somebody else?
No, I won't take up any more time here. Let the rest of the guys talk about what they've seen. It's good talking with you, Ian, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Ryan. Joining me on the podcast is a new face to the podcast, Anton Shilov. He's our news editor based in Eastern Europe. Say hi, Anton.
Hi.
Anton being not at the show, that has plenty of benefits with regards to seeing what news is coming out that we don't necessarily get to see. Even though he's not on the show floor, we still get messages from Anton during the week saying, "Have you guys seen this? Have you guys seen that? Have you guys seen this?" So interesting to hear what you saw saw from the show that really interested you, Anton.
Well, first and foremost, multiple companies introduced very interesting monitors during the show. So ASUS, LG, obviously Dell.
Talk to me about the Dell monitor, because I mean I saw some news about it, but this is a pretty big thing in the industry, right?
Well, basically yes, because up to now you could only get 8K monitors. So first of all, this is a large monitor. This is 8K resolution. And the thing is, up to now, you could only buy an 8K monitor if you were on more or less open market and do not have special relationships with companies like Sharp. Only from Canon, that is a reference monitor, so it costs like $20,000 or something. And then you need a very special graphics card, professional graphics card to run it.
I remember seeing one at IFA. I think it was a Sharp monitor, sort of 32-inch, 8K, required 4 display inputs, and that was just for that was just for sort of like verification of 8K recording, right? From people like NHK and stuff.
Yep, that's what is called reference monitor. So it has very fancy backlighting. So this backlight actually consumes pretty much of power. And if you go to forums where those professional video editors hang out, then you see them discussing Dolby monitors, which also reference monitors, and the backlighting, which is like 4,000 nits or something.
So if you want to buy it, you better have a 5-6-figure checkbook.
Yep, but basically you don't buy it for home use, because people who need those monitors actually work somewhere in offices and have a lot of other equipment, have a lot of other expensive equipment, so monitor may not be the most expensive part of it. At the end of the day, cameras cost even more.
So describe this 32-inch 8K from Dell. What are we getting and how much is it?
So that's 32-inch display, that's 400 nits brightness. That's higher than on most of today's monitors, but not as high as on some other new and upcoming monitors, which we're going to see this year. So refresh rate is 60 Hz, which is perfectly fine for professionals. And speaking of professionals, it supports 100% of Adobe RGB and 100% of sRGB color spaces. So no DCI-P3, no Rec 2020, and things like that. So if you edit videos, you are not going to buy this monitor. But if you're after photos or design, or if you're an architect or an engineer, that's the display you're going to want.
If you want to edit 4K content side by side, I mean, I remember when the first 4K monitors came out and people were like, cool, I get to edit 1080 video side by side. And now with an 8K you can do 4K video side by side.
Well, you may say that, but frankly speaking, if you need to edit a huge picture, a huge high-resolution picture, the bigger monitor you can get and the higher resolution you can get, the better. So because of the massive display, I'm assuming we don't have controllers that can handle this over a single cable yet. Not without compression, because you can plug it to any NVIDIA GeForce GTX 10 graphics card with DisplayPort 1.4, and it can handle the 8K resolution with 60 Hz, but only with compression. And compression is something that people like engineers or photographers are not going to like, frankly speaking.
Assuming they know about it to begin with.
Well,
it depends how much they research what they're using, I guess.
I guess those people who really are professionals and who know the stuff are actually doing some research, especially because that monitor actually is going to cost 5K, and that's a lot of money. So you're going to do some research.
So okay, you just said $5,000. Now, if I remember correctly, the first 32-inch 4K monitors from Sharp were $5,000 back, I don't know, 2012, I want to say.
Perhaps, because I don't remember.
Yeah, no, I remember being in Taiwan at one of the motherboard vendors using that Sharp 4K monitor for some of the first 4K game testing. And yeah, it was essentially a brick. I mean, I'm sure Dell, with their design ID, have got this more down, but $5,000 isn't that much given what we got for $5,000 a few years back.
Well, that's for sure, but then again, it's not for the mainstream, and it's for professional use. So if you make a lot of money on your projects, then money is not a problem for this particular device.
I'm pretty sure we're going to get some requests for Ryan to start testing graphics cards at 8K soon. I know it's a stepping stone to perhaps doing some deeper VR testing rather than actually have the headset. I guess you just whack in all the megapixels you can. See how it goes.
Basically speaking, given the price and the fact that most of contemporary graphics cards are going to be slow at 4K resolution, I believe it doesn't make any sense to test in GPUs in that resolution. But perhaps if we're speaking about gamers, so perhaps it makes sense to go ultra wide, something like.
It's almost ironic that the games that perform the best are people who are not going to end up buying this monitor. The Minecraft, the Dota. You don't buy a $5,000 monitor to play Dota.
Well,
or maybe some people do. I don't know.
That's plain stupid. But at the end of the day, if you really want to play Dota and on a large screen, then maybe it makes sense to buy an expensive TV that will be larger than 32 inches, and the resolution will be 4K. You can enable FSA, and that'll look perfect. And it's larger, so your experience will be even better on that, and for less money.
Okay, so Dell's 8K. Was there anything else on your list?
Oh, probably ASUS, which is basically the world's first Rec 2020 monitor.
Oh, this is the ProArt as opposed to the ROG. So we covered the ROG Swift with Ryan earlier, but the ProArt is another 4K 144 Hz monitor?
Yep, that's 4K again 32-inch monitors, but this one comes with quantum dots, and quantum dots is actually bring all the magic here.
This is using a special film over the display to bring out professional color space certification, right?
Yep. And by the way, speaking just a little bit about, I'm coming back to the Dell one. Actually, Dell sources that 8K panel from LG. So eventually, as far as I know, LG is going to start mass production of its 8K panels in March. So right after it starts mass production, unless it has some kind of an exclusive supply agreement with Dell for 8K panels, it can release an appropriate monitor itself. And it will be very interesting to see how they are going to position it, because they also can apply quantum dots on it and offer it to a different audience than Dell, because Dell offers it for photographers and architects, and LG could offer it to other people, like including those who are working with video.
Yeah, I mean the whole color space thing. For me, it's all about high dynamic HDR. Just because when I saw it at the show, it's as Ryan said earlier, we can't accurately show just the importance of HDR and having those vibrant colors come at you on the website. It's something that you have to see in person.
Yes, that's for sure. And, well, actually that ProArt PA32U display from ASUS does support HDR, but not only HDR. It also supports Rec 2020. Supports it and covers like 85% of it.
Which is pretty rare for a monitor anyway, so...
For a monitor, and this is the world's first monitor, mass market monitor that actually has some coverage, because people who are working with video professionally have to use Sony OLED displays and again reference displays from other companies and so on and so on. So it costs an arm and a leg. But this one is going to cost like less than $2,000, like ASUS says right now, and this is pretty much significant because if you watch Blu-rays on your PC, for some reason, then this monitor is for you. Moreover, if you edit videos, maybe not professionally, but still you need those cool color spaces, then again, this monitor is for you.
It'd be interesting to see how they implement the selection for the different color spaces, whether it's just going to be automatic or manual. It's like I said with Ryan, it makes me sad that we don't have a dedicated display monitor viewer, though I'm sure Brandon's going to enjoy himself during Q2 when all these panels start coming to the market.
Yeah, that's for sure. And obviously, the question is how to test them, because Microsoft Windows doesn't really handle this IP3 pretty well, and I'm not sure about Rec 2020 either.
I'm sure Brandon will have a solution.
Yeah, at the end of the day, there are Macs.
Yeah. Anything else that you saw from the show?
What's actually surprised me most is that we didn't see a lot of truly innovative and truly high-end all-in-one PCs at the show, but we saw a lot of mini-PCs at the show. Mini-PCs of different kinds, so from companies like from Zotac, ECS, and so on and so on. So it looks like everyone is...
Oh, yeah, that's right. If I remember correctly, Computex, we saw the sort of curved screen all-in-one PCs from Gigabyte and somebody else.
Yep, actually that was last CES, if I'm not mistaken.
Was that last CES? Oh, interesting.
Curved all-in-ones with replaceable graphics card and so on.
Yeah. But for mini-PCs, we had ASUS launch their console, ESC Vivo PCX,
and the new GR8.
So these are very small. The GR8 we've kind of covered before. It's essentially as big as to fit in a bookcase, and the new Vivo PCX is designed to look like... It almost looks like an Xbox, I'll be honest. I saw it on the show, and the idea is what? Mobile CPU... Is it a GTX 1060?
Yeah, mobile CPU, GTX 1060, but the GR8 2 has 32 gigs of RAM, whereas the Vivo X has only 8 gigs of RAM, so that's not exactly what the game is like, but on the other hand, the price looks like very competitive. Then again, for $800, you get a PC that you cannot upgrade, full of mobile parts. And based on the pictures they supplied, the only thing you can replace is their SSD.
But it is VR ready.
Well, yes, it's VR ready, but then again, provided that GTX 1060 can actually handle demanded VR games. It's
interesting. You and I were talking about the feasibility. When people buy these mini PCs, do they really expect to be able to upgrade them? And is this a feature that people actually want when they buy a pre-built PC?
Well, in fact, yes, because, for example, if you build an HD PC for your room and then you switch the TV for 4K and you want to watch 4K movies, then you're gonna need a new Blu-ray drive because firmware limitations of first generation Blu-ray drives won't let you use those 4K discs, and then you need a new graphics card. And this is where actually an upgrade makes sense.
Well, you see, my argument would be that, if you're buying a pre-built PC, then perhaps either you don't have time to organize upgrades and build it yourself, or you're not confident in it and you just want a sealed system that works for 3 to 5 years. I mean, sure, you're not going to get you're not going to be able to upgrade to new functionality over the next 5 years, but it's just there. It's just there, and it works for what it does.
Well, yes, but if you're going to keep your system for 5 years, that's perfectly fine to watch movies and play simple games. But if you are going to play demanding games, new games, then you're going to upgrade. Then you're going to want to upgrade it after a couple of years. Because I frankly do not believe that GTX 1060 will deliver 60 FPS even at full HD resolution, like 2 years down the road.
Yeah, I think you have to play your games 5 years late. I think so. What came out 5 years ago is now your new game to play today.
Well, that's one strategy, but then again,
yeah, I know there's many different ways in which we can take that conversation. I guess maybe for a different time.
Well, or perhaps at least some of those small form factor PCs for gamers, which use MXM models, will be upgradable because NVIDIA or their graphics cards partners start to sell MXM models on open market.
That may be the case. Go through an OEM or something.
I think Eurocom actually offers upgrades of MXM models for their laptops, and so do some US-based companies.
Yeah, Eurocom's pretty good for that sort of thing. Just to pick one out of the ecosystem. Also,
again, alternatively, you can try to buy things like GIGABYTE GT Gaming system, which is not as small as those PCs, and obviously much more expensive.
Actually, GIGABYTE's Gaming GT system. Explain this one to our listeners, because for me this was an interesting thing to come out right at the beginning of the show.
Well, just before the 2016 ended, GIGABYTE uploaded information about their about GT Gaming console-like PC to their website, and that system is like, the volume of that system is like 10 liters, and it's very large. It's relatively large, but 8 packs. A desktop CPU, a desktop graphics card, GTX 1080. It uses normal memory, it uses normal SSDs, normal hard drives, and so on and so on. So you can really go and upgrade it a year later. So initially, GIGABYTE is going to offer it with Core i7 6700K, but eventually you can get something better.
It's a little bit bigger than, say, a busy student's lever arch binder, but it's color green, and it's following the trend of on-the-desk high-end gaming PCs that draw the air in from the bottom and put it out the top. I mean, you could argue that one of the designs that brought that to market was, the Apple Mac Pro. But this trend for gaming PCs is going on. We saw it with ASUS with their G20 systems 18 months ago, I think. 24 months ago, and now we've got GIGABYTE doing it with the Gaming GT. And it's got special flaps on the top that open up when the system gets warm.
Yep. And actually, we actually saw some, I don't remember who it was, but some PC case makers are actually making 2 chamber cases for Mini-ITX motherboards. One chamber is for the CPU, another chamber is for the GPU. And obviously, the systems are small and they're relatively easy to cool down because the hottest components are separated into different chambers.
The idea is at least one dimension is thin, so it's tall and deep, but not really that wide. And with the Gigabyte system, so I'm actually just going through your news post in front of me here. i7 700K, which you said, GTX 1080, which you said. That's using an off-the-shelf GTX 1080 card as well. It's not a specially designed one for this system. 32 gigs of memory, pick your SSD and hard drive, Wi-Fi networking, a high-end audio, Thunderbolt 3, and is that an off-the-shelf power supply? Flex ATX?
Well, it should be enough, but then again, you're not going to have a lot of overclock and headroom.
Yeah. Well, it says here 400 watts. That's plenty for the CPU and the GTX 1080. So,
yes. And unless since you can't install a lot of hard drives inside, you still can enjoy some overclocking, I guess. And moreover, in case you actually do not want to buy a pre-built system by Gigabyte or somebody else, you can get that new Corsair Bulldog 2.0, which is...
Oh yeah, they announced the update for the Bulldog.
So right now they have, up till recently, they have these 170-based Bulldog. Now they have the 270-based bar bones, and that's...
So they're moving from an ASUS Z170 Mini ITX to an MSI Z170 ITX.
Gigabyte 270. They switched from Gigabyte 170 to MSI 270. And the thing is, you have 600 watts power supply unit, and you can still install an off-the-shelf graphics card there. So and it's compatible with liquid cooling by Corsair. So you basically can just buy any off-the-shelf graphics card and a CPU, install there, and overclock, because 600 watts, that's plenty of power for this class of components.
Yeah, I always find Bulldog interesting because it's the one product I can point to and say an ex-AnandTech editor is the product manager for it. If any of our readers remember Dustin Sklavos, he actually manages the Bulldog project. So it's really fun. Still trying to. I don't review cases, so I guess I can be biased a little bit. But the fact that it's Dustin's baby and his idea, and he gets to manage that project, I think is pretty cool. And with this new update, it means that it's updated to new USB 3.1 controllers, new Wi-Fi module, new audio, and new CPUs. It's still sold as a bare bones, so you still have to add CPU, memory, GPU, and it's still keeping the same price point despite the upgrades. So
they're keeping the price point, and they actually upgraded the CPU cooler. So they say that it's quiet, but they do not explicitly say that it's quiet as the predecessor, but we obviously expect it to be quiet as its direct predecessor. So that's a significant upgrade.
So $400 gets you the case, the power supply, the motherboard, and the CPU cooler.
Yep, so that's pretty much a bargain, because those Mini ITX high-end motherboards are pretty expensive after all, and so are small computer cases.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to get Tracy to do a review of the second generation Bulldog. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, I'm not going to keep you any longer, Anton. I know I want to bring Matt onto the podcast next to talk about mobile stuff. But glad to have you with us on the podcast. First time, one of many.
Okay, glad to be with you too.
So next up to the plate, joining me, we have Matt Humrick, our senior smartphone editor. Say hi, Matt.
Hello.
Now, at the show, you and Josh were in charge of all the mobile coverage. Now, I know CES isn't necessarily a hotbed of mobile coverage. We've got Mobile World Congress in a few weeks in Barcelona for that. But there were a few announcements at the show that you found interesting, right?
Yeah, probably the biggest announcement was Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 SoC, which we'll probably be seeing a lot of this year in flagship devices.
835. Last we had was 820, so what makes 835 different?
There's two major updates to the 835. The first is that it's going to be the first mobile SoC on a 10 nanometer process. So it's using Samsung's 10 LPE FinFET node.
Moving to 10 nanometer does what exactly?
Well, according to Samsung anyway, it's going to allow either higher performance and or lower power consumption, and it also allows you to reduce size. So Qualcomm mentioned that the overall die size for 835 is 35% smaller than Snapdragon 820.
So this arguably makes it cheaper to produce, but because it's on 10 nanometer, it's more expensive to produce anyway.
Yeah, I would assume so.
And you said moving to 10 nanometer means higher frequencies. Does that mean we're going to see 3 gigahertz on this phone?
No. So yeah, let's talk about the CPU. Obviously, last year with Snapdragon 820, one of the big changes was that it used Qualcomm's first custom 64-bit CPU architecture, Creo. It was a quad-core CPU, 2 sort of higher clocked cores and 2 lower clock cores that had less L2 cache. So with the Snapdragon 835 and its Creo 280 CPU, instead of updating its custom architecture, Qualcomm took advantage of ARM's new built-on ARM Cortex technology license, which allows them to take ARM's stock core designs and request certain changes to create a sort of semi-custom architecture.
We were talking about this midweek with regards to ARM licenses. ARM currently offers 2 licenses. You either take the core they produce as is, or you take the instruction set and produce your own core. So this is something in the middle.
Yes, so before it was sort of an all or nothing. You either had to take ARM's cores, or if you wanted to do anything different, even just one minor change, that meant you had to take the architecture license and basically start from scratch. So this definitely fills a needed gap in between those two extremes.
So, why exactly did Qualcomm move from using their own custom cores? Surely this seems like they're taking the easy option.
Well, Qualcomm's official statement is that with each generation, they evaluate what technology is available and use what's currently the best. Basically, with Creo 280, we can expect higher IPC and better efficiency than what we saw with Snapdragon 820. We don't know a lot about Creo 280. It's a octa-core CPU, so it's a big little configuration. The 4 little cores are likely based on the Cortex A53 core with some customizations, and the 4 big cores are either A72 or A73 with additional customizations.
So customizations are things like changing cache sizes or adding additional functionality to increase certain workflows, right?
Yeah, so it allows the vendor to sort of customize the core to meet whatever their performance or efficiency goals are, or whatever applications they're targeting. So it's not a free-for-all license. So there's specific things you cannot change, like decoder width and things with the pipelines you can't change because, basically that's more or less a redesign of the whole architecture. So there's some things that are off limits. A lot of the things that are allowed have to do with more of the front end of the CPU. So like branch prediction, like you mentioned, caches, things like that. The only thing that Qualcomm specifically mentioned was increasing size of the out-of-order execution buffer.
Okay, so it can take in more instructions and arrange them as needed. Usually something like that is... I know, you think it'd be actually a fairly large cache with active management, which could be, consuming power. Now, we've seen on the PC side that the larger you make that out-of-order execution window, it's a land of diminishing returns, really. So it'll be interesting to see how Qualcomm are playing this, because 835, it's not just a chip designed for smartphones, is it?
No, and I mean the larger instruction window is one of the things that gives Apple's CPUs their higher IPC. Like you mentioned, the larger the instruction window, that's going to impact power usage. It's also going to limit peak frequencies. So, as you mentioned, there's a diminishing returns there. But Qualcomm is targeting a large range of applications for the Snapdragon 835. It's not just for smartphones or tablets. One of the big use cases they see is virtual reality HMDs. So not just a viewer where you snap a smartphone into it, but actual standalone HMD with a Snapdragon 835 embedded in it. They're also looking to start putting the 835 into Windows PCs. So one of the big announcements here just a little while ago was that you can run full Windows 10 on Snapdragon 835, including support for Win32 apps through software emulation.
So that's a direct translation from x86 instructions into x86 variable width instructions into ARM fixed length instructions, and dealing with all the caveats in between. We've seen a few companies try that before. What makes Qualcomm think their solution will be any different?
I don't know, and we have yet to see what the actual applications are. They talk about basically always connected PCs, using a cellular modem. So I'm imagining a very ultra portable laptop with an always-on cellular connection is probably what they're targeting.
Currently, if you use the Intel chips, the 4.5 watt chips, they don't come with the modem integrated. You actually have to have an external modem. So Qualcomm offering a fully integrated solution, cheaper bill of materials, lower costs, that sort of thing.
Right.
Is the GPU any different in 835?
Yeah, it has the Adreno 540 GPU, which is an update of the Adreno 530 and the 820. Basically, it's the same basic architecture, but they've gone in and optimized for some of the bottlenecks and looked at further reducing power consumption by tweaking things like doing more aggressive depth rejection, that sort of thing. So, and we're also expecting slightly higher clock speeds.
Qualcomm's usually very protective of their GPU architecture. We don't typically get to see much inside of it, do we? Like, say, in Mali.
No, it's pretty much a black box. And for the Adreno 540, Qualcomm is quoting about a 25% increase in performance over the 530.
Okay, so that's a combination of new process, slightly updated microarchitecture, but more frequency. So power considering, that's still a significant jump up. I understand they're using they're not using ARM's interconnect, are they? So surprisingly, while they're using an ARM custom core, they're not using ARM interconnect.
Well, there's a little bit of a question around that. So,
okay.
They had initially told me that it was a custom interconnect, but we've seen some other evidence that it might be an ARM solution. So, I'm not 100% sure on what the interconnect really is.
Oh, okay. If ARM's offering custom cores, they might be offering custom interconnects as well.
Yeah, or, Qualcomm is using its own memory controller design, so it's possible that they could have their own interconnect as well, but, they just don't discuss that in depth, so.
Oh, okay. Now, we're getting update with DSPs in the core. I actually, just before we started recording this, caught a news item that says that due to some of the DSPs, the 835's approved for Google TensorFlow for image recognition. That's going to lend itself to stuff like VR and automotive, isn't it?
Yeah, so one of the big things that Qualcomm is pushing is heterogeneous computing. and all of the advanced features that it enables, such as artificial intelligence, virtual and augmented reality, a lot of things around advanced image processing, or even object recognition. So we saw this with the Snapdragon 820, and the 835 basically just sort of builds on that framework. So with the 820, we saw a big upgrade to the Hexagon DSP core. So now it can do vector instructions, which greatly improves its compute capacity.
The ARM core already does Neon instructions, which are essentially vector instructions. So what makes the Hexagon ones different?
So they didn't really talk about the Hexagon 682 in 835, but based on the small change in number from the 820 had the Hexagon 680. I would assume that the 682 is going to be very similar in terms of architecture. So the Hexagon 680 can handle 2 vector threads in parallel, and each of those threads can contain up to 4 1024-bit SIMD pipelines, whereas the Neon pipelines on an ARM CPU are only 128-bit SIMD. So basically, each of the 2 threads in the Hexagon DSP can work on 4096 bits per cycle compared to only 256 bits per cycle for a single ARM CPU core.
Oh, okay. That changes the game a little bit, as long as they do it within a power window, I guess.
Yeah, and again, according to Qualcomm, because the DSP is specifically designed for these workloads, for example, it can only work on integer values and not floating point. So, not doing floating point, you can greatly simplify the architecture and reduce power consumption. So, the DSP isn't an all-purpose processor like a CPU. It's not meant to handle every possible workload. It's designed for very specific things, and when you run those specific things on it, you can see large performance and power gains relative to the CPU.
Now, I know you and Josh, you guys did a write-up of this, and I'd fully encourage listeners to go check the website for that. But the crux of the matter is, are we going to see it in phones, MWC, in a few weeks?
Yes. I mean, we haven't heard anything official yet, but I fully expect to see announcements of phones or other devices using Snapdragon 835 at MWC. And there's also rumors that we might even get a phone announced before MWC with 835 in it.
Okay. Sounds like you're going to be busy at MWC. All these phones.
Yep.
Speaking of phones, I know you wanted to touch on a few of the phones that were announced at CES this year.
Yeah, there were a few. Again, like you said, all the big announcements are going to come at MWC. But there were a couple. For starters, Huawei announced that the Mate 9 is officially coming to the US, and it will also come bundled with Amazon's Alexa voice assistant.
Now, I've had my Mate 9 for a couple of months now already. Does that mean I get it as well?
It will be coming in a software update later this year. They didn't give a specific time frame, so it sounded like it's still maybe a few months away, my guess. But it will, but it will come via an OTA update.
Good.
I think the announcement. I think that's just for the US version. So I don't think that's like Mate 9s in every region.
Oh, I'm gonna have to start sending some emails and asking some questions then.
So the other Huawei announcement was the Honor 6X, which is obviously the follow-up to the Honor 5X that came out last year. This is sort of a low mid-range phone that's coming to the U.S. market.
Isn't this the one that they're trying to make the cheapest dual camera phone?
Yeah. So I've had a little bit of time to play with it, and the first thing I noticed is that in terms of design and build quality, the Honor 6X is right away it's noticeably better than the 5X. It just feels a lot more sturdy. There's not as much flex. It feels like a more expensive phone and looks like a better phone. In terms of the internals, it's sort of a mild upgrade. It comes with the high-silicon Kirin 655 SoC, which is an octa-core A53 design with higher clock speeds than the Snapdragon 616 in the 5X, which was also an octa-core A53. So it's a little disappointing to see octa-core A53 designs still in 2017 at this price point. We've already seen the Redmi Note 3 Pro come with a Snapdragon SoC that had two A72 cores, which offer much better performance. So, for most people, the octa-core A53 will probably still be enough, but it's definitely a step down in performance from having the big A72 or A73 cores. The other there's two more interesting things. One is that the Honor 6X still uses a micro USB 2 port.
Yes, I noticed that. Why?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Type-C costs that much more than micro USB 2 or what the rationale is there, but it's, again, in 2017, I would expect pretty much all phones to have Type-C connectors.
Maybe because they are going for that sort of low to mid-range, they think those users are still on micro USB and that's what they have around the house. I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps. So I guess if you still have all micro USB peripherals, maybe that's a plus for you. And then the other thing was, like you mentioned, the dual rear camera. So we saw last year one of the big features for certainly flagship phones was the move to using dual cameras. There's a couple different ways that they were being used, either having different focal lengths, so you get basically different zoom levels, or by combining the output of the two cameras to improve, reduce the noise in basically low light situations, and just improve image quality overall. Huawei is one of the main OEMs that are pushing the dual cameras. We see the Mate 9 with the dual camera, the P9 had dual camera, the Honor 8 has a dual camera, so now the Honor 6 has a dual camera. So it has, the primary is a 12 megapixel camera with PDAF, and then there's a second camera, it's a small 2 megapixel camera that's basically dedicated for depth sensing, and so they're not combining the output like they are with the Honor 8 to improve image quality. They're basically using the second camera to do some sort of simulated bokeh effects.
Adjusting the thing in the picture that's in focus, post-processing.
Yeah, so you would have, the subject of an image, maybe it's, a person's face or something, that would be in focus, and then you could blur the background, kind of like you get with low aperture lenses on DSLR cameras.
While I appreciate dual cameras coming to cheaper smartphones, overall it sounds like they've had to take a hit in terms of the other bits of the hardware of the system.
Yeah, so I think they would have been better off just, sticking with a single, primary camera and spending the extra money on upgrading the SoC.
They need to upgrade the Wi-Fi. I remember Josh saying something about the Wi-Fi.
Oh, right. It does not have AC Wi-Fi. It's only 802.11 BGN. And only 2.4 gigahertz, no 5 gigahertz.
Oh, why? That's pain.
Yeah, so I think their money could have been better spent on SoC and upgrading the wireless, based on what the second rear camera really gets you.
And price? What is this smartphone starting at?
Let me check my notes here. So the version with 3 gigs of RAM will start at basically $250 and is already available for pre-order in the US and will start shipping January 15th. And then will be coming to several other countries a little bit later. There will also be a version with 4 gigs of RAM that will be available, later in the first quarter, and that'll be $300.
If you had $300, what would be the smartphone you'd get today?
That's a good question. I think it's an easier question to answer if you live outside the United States, because there's quite a few more phones that actually work on LTE networks. In the US, our choices are actually pretty limited because most of the phones that come from Chinese OEMs, don't work on our LTE networks over here. So phones like the Honor 6X are among the few options that we really have. There's the Moto G4, I think, at this price point, which I can't remember the specs off the top of my head. But I think really what you need to do is just wait for, mid-range, higher spec mid-range phones to go on sale for $300. It's kind of the plan there.
Oh, okay. So I know in London they've been advertising the OnePlus 3T a lot.
Yeah, so what is that, 400 something?
Yeah, so if something like that ever came on sale, I think.
Yeah, or, like I know the Moto Z phones, the Moto Z Droid, the Play. I think Verizon has had some sales, even buy one get one free sales. So that basically reduce those prices down into that $300 range, and those are going to be much higher performing phones.
Now, of course, if you have more budget, I was at the ASUS press event and they showed off the first Tango enabled augmented reality smartphone or something?
Yeah, so ASUS announced two new phones, the Zenfone 3 Zoom and the Zenfone AR. The Zenfone AR is more of a flagship device, and
the world's first smartphone with 3 cameras on the rear.
Yeah, so it's the first smartphone that supports both Google's Tango augmented reality technology and Google's Daydream VR technology. So you get both AR and VR in one phone. And so on the back you have a rather serious-looking camera module with 3 separate cameras. There's a 23-megapixel primary camera that's a Sony IMX318. It's got dual phase detect autofocus, like Samsung's Galaxy S7, where basically every pixel is a phase detect pixel. And then it combines that also with laser AF and traditional contrast AF. It also has 4-axis optical image stabilization. There's a separate sensor, color spectrum sensor for setting white balance. So certainly in terms of specs, the primary camera sounds pretty good. And then it also has a separate camera for doing motion tracking and a separate depth sensing camera. Both of those work with Google's Tango technology.
Well, it's interesting that in this space, because when you're in that augmented reality situation, not only do you have to get the data, the photon hits the sensor has to convert it into something the SoC will recognize. It will then process it and then update the display, and that has to be super low latency.
Yeah, so VR and AR applications are very processing intensive, and you're basically using all of the individual processors inside the SoC. So as you mentioned, you're getting input from the cameras, which is getting processed by the ISP. There's actually on the Snapdragon 835 and also the 820, there's actually 2 compute DSPs. So you have the main hexagon DSP, which is doing things like 6 degree of freedom motion tracking, and then there's the low power DSP, which is basically your sensor hub. So it's taking all of your gyro inputs and other sensor inputs and all the data from the ISP, the 2 DSPs, and then obviously the GPU is going to be updating the display. And then the CPU is, coordinating all of this activity. So basically all the processors inside the SoC are busy.
So you don't get much battery life then, I'd assume.
Yeah, did they mention, let me check my notes. I don't know if they actually mentioned battery life. But obviously it's going to be similar or a little bit less battery life than what you would get if you're playing an intense 3D game.
Which can already be very little. It's going to be interesting. Have they contacted you to be sampled yet?
No. So, usually, gaming, you're getting around 3 hours battery life. pretty consistently. So I would expect if you're using Tango or doing VR, I would expect something in the 2 to 3 hour range. Again, depending on the device and battery size.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually looking at the spec sheets from when you posted about it, and is this the first smartphone that's going to have 8 gig of LPDDR4?
It is. So now there's a smartphone that has as much RAM as my PC.
I think we need to update your PC. That's appalling. That's an appalling admission, especially on my part.
Yeah, well, my laptop does have 16 gigs, so.
And apart from the AR, they also had another Zenfone 3. I mean, Zenfone 2, they had about 50 different models, so...
Yeah, I completely lost track of how many Zenfone 2s, or even 3s. They've got quite a few Zenfone 3s, too. So this is the Zenfone 3 Zoom. It's more of a mid-range device, so it's got a Snapdragon 625 SoC, which is an octa-core A53. Again, but this one is on a FinFET process, so I would expect that to have pretty good efficiency.
That's Samsung's 14 nanometer, right?
I believe so, yeah. And then you have options for 3 or 4 gigs of RAM, and that is it's a 5.5 inch 1080p AMOLED screen, which is a little bit lower pixel density than one we'd like to see, but it's probably suitable for most people.
Now, what it's interesting you mentioned about the 14 nanometer FinFET, because this is like a 5,000 milliamp hour battery smartphone.
Yep, it's got a big 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and having the octa-core A53s, which are pretty low power by themselves, but on a FinFET process, this should have pretty excellent battery life.
Now, it's not called Zoom for a reason. This is yet another dual camera.
Yep, so it's got 2 cameras on the back. There's sort of the usual wide-angle camera, which is a 12 megapixel unit with a 25 millimeter equivalent focal length. That also has the dual phase detect autofocus combined with laser AF. Also has optical image stabilization. Also has the color spectrum sensor. So it sounds like a pretty decent camera. And then the second camera is what they call the zoom camera, which has a 59 millimeter focal length. That's also 12 megapixels. So this is sort of a similar setup to what the iPhone 7 uses with its dual cameras, where you have a wide-angle camera that can capture more of a scene, but makes everything appear smaller and farther away. Whereas the second camera, with its 59 millimeter focal length, gives you a slight zoom. So it's going to slightly magnify the image compared to what you would see with your naked eye.
It says in your piece that it's a 2.3x optical zoom. Isn't that more than the iPhone?
Well, I think their 2.3x is the difference between the 25 millimeter camera and the 59 millimeter camera.
Okay.
So it's not, when they say it's an optical zoom, that's basically switching from one camera to the other. So it's not like a typical zoom lens where you can smoothly select any zoom range between those two focal lengths. It's just it's a hard switch over. And then I think they're doing some some cropping, software interpolation in the background to kind of go between. But
okay. And these are both due out later this year, the Zoom and the AR?
Yeah, so the Zenfone 3 Zoom will be available in February, and the Zenfone AR will be available sometime in Q2, it says. And I don't think they mentioned price.
It'd be interesting to see if ASUS are planning some stuff at Mobile World Congress, because I'm pretty sure we should be able to get some hands-on time with the AR. Be interesting to get your thoughts with that. I'll have to stick it in the schedule. Yeah,
I haven't had a chance to play with Google's Tango AR technology yet. So
it's funny. We've just finished CES, and actually today, as we're recording this, we started doing the Mobile World Congress schedule. It's just one show after another this time of year. Looking forward to MWC, Matt?
Not really. But I've been to MWC twice, and both times I've gone, my luggage has been misplaced. or has not shown up with me. So the first time I went, I basically did the first, was it 3 or 4 days of the show on one set of clothes and none of my equipment.
You need to make fewer connections.
Yeah. Well, this year, my connecting flight is still in the U.S., so I don't have to switch to a European carrier, which I think was the issue the other 2 times. So hopefully I'll actually arrive with clothing.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to stop it there. Thanks to all the guys who have appeared on the podcast. I mean, CES, it's the big show that starts the year, and next we have MWC. I know Ryan is due at the Game Developer Conference GDC the same week. It's just going to be another crazy couple of months, and we're glad for all our readers and all our listeners who keep with us through the melee of news and exciting product announcements. So it's goodbye from me, and goodbye from Matt.
Bye, everyone.
And we'll catch you next time.